let's impute another section. Let's call it the project section, in which case this company will be showcasing some of the projects they've accomplished or delivered in their history thus far. Okay, let's go back to the code editor, and under this section we just concluded, which is the pedigree section, we start another section, a new section, and give it a class name of projects, section.projects. Before proceeding to execute the HTML markup for the project section of our website, let me show you a glimpse of how I want us to represent the projects section of this web page. Here we go. Let's take this as an instance of the project section. It has a heading, a subheading, and 3 showcase boxes representing projects that they've achieved or delivered in times past, with the project titles down here. So we're going to group this content in this way. This heading and subheading, we'll group them into one box and call the box, give the box a class name of top. Then the showcase section that has 3 boxes, we're going to group these 3 boxes into one central box and call that box, or give that particular box, a class name of bottom. That's the visualization for how we're going to represent the project section. Let's go over to our code editor and do just that. All right, good. So I said we're going to have first a div of top and then a div of bottom. The top div, like I said, is going to have a heading and a subheading. A heading could be H1, subheading could be H2 or H3, as you please. So inside the top div, we'll have a H1 and a H2. We're going to call we just put dummy text, the H1, we just say, hey there. Then the H2, we could just key in, here's a list of projects we accomplished and delivered recently. Yeah, that's it. So if you go over to your web page and see how that is represented, good. This is how it is presented for now, without any styling. Here's what we got. Let's give the H1 and the H2 a bit of styling. We'll go over to our code editor. This is the H1 and the H2. They're inside of the div with the class name of top, which is also in a section with a class name of project. So we could use the selector dot projects H1. What this means is the H1 inside of the projects section. The font size is big. Let's take it down a little bit. Let's give it a font size of, say, 55 pixels. That's it. I think that's good enough. If you go over to our reference design, you will see there is a line separating the H1 and the H2. We could use a border property for that. What we do is we'll give the H1, which is a block level element, a border bottom. All right, let's effect that on our code. The H1, we set the border bottom property, border bottom 2 pixels solid, it's black in color. If you go over to your web page, that's the line right there. Notice also there is a gap between the edge of the screen and where the H1 starts. In our design, our H1 is already flushing against the edge of the screen. We can create that gap effect using padding. Remember, padding is internal spacing. So we'll go over to our code editor and set the padding left property. Why are we using padding left? Because it is the left hand side of the H1 or the heading element we intend to create a space. So padding left, set it to 82 pixels. Good. 82 pixels just suits because we want this H1 to line up, to be on the same line with the edge of this photo, so that there will be some form of alignment or arrangement. Instead of content on our web page to be zigzag or haphazard, it's best they line up vertically along the same X or Y coordinates. All right, good. Next, let's go style the H2 and move it a couple of spaces to the same coordinates. We take the selector .projects H2, which means the H2 tag or the H2 element inside of the project section. Let's give it a padding left as well of the same value, 82 pixels. That is what we got. Padding left, 82 pixels. Let's scale down on the font weight and set it to normal. The font weight property set to normal makes it not to have that bold effect. But let's see how it is in our reference design. The font size is big. Let's scale up the font size for the H2 element. Let's give it a font size of say 28 pixels and see how it renders. All right. Let's take it up to 30 pixels or 32 pixels. All right. This is fair enough. Let's have it this way. Next thing I want you to notice is there is a bit of gap between from the bottom of the H1 to the borderline, which means the Y is not touching the borderline. But in our design, the Y is touching the borderline. We're going to set padding bottom to take care of that spacing. We'll go over to our H1 and set padding bottom property. Let's set 10 pixels and see how it goes. That's 10 pixels. Does it look okay? Yeah, I think 10 pixels is okay enough. Also, there's a bit of spacing between the borderline and the H2. In order to create a little bit of gap between the borderline and the top of the H2, we'll go over to our code editor and give a padding top property, a padding top of, let's say, 10 pixels. Alright, I think that's fair enough. Let's take it down a bit to 7 pixels. Okay, let's leave it that way. Next up are 3 boxes that are meant to be within a particular box called the div.bottom. Let's go over to our code to get that executed. Instead of our div with a class name of bottom, we're going to have 3 divs, which is dot project 1, then dot project 2, dot project 2, and then dot project 3. Okay, here we are with 3 divs. Nothing shows on our web page at the moment. Good, except to give it some styling. Let's style these 3 divs. We'll go with dot bottom div. What this selector means is the div inside of the div with the class of bottom, because the div with the class of bottom is the parent div of project 1, project 2, and project 3 divs. Okay, so all the divs inside, let's give them a common height of, let's say, 400 pixels and a border of 2 pixels, or rather 3 pixels solid black. Go over to our web page and this is what we have: 3 divs with a height of 400 pixels. This is the first div, second div, and third div that corresponds to projects 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we might have to let's reference our mockup. Okay, that's fair enough. 3 divs with a black border, but the border here seems to be not as thick as ours, so let's go and scale down our border from 3 pixels to 2 pixels solid black. Okay, also I want us, for the purpose of citing, let's make visible the parent div of these project divs. The parent div of this project divs is div with a class of bottom. To make it visible on our web page, let's just give it a border for now, a border of 2 pixels solid salmon. Can you see the border of 2 pixels solid salmon? That is it right there. Okay, I want us now, just as it is on our mockup, to be sure that these divs, they have the starting point lined up with the coordinate, with the x coordinate right here. Okay, so that is, we're going to have to set padding on an element. We're going to have to set padding on an element. We'll go over to our code editor now and set padding on the parent div, padding left precisely on the parent div, and give it the same 82 pixels value and see what happens. Good. This is the parent div with a class of bottom. That's the border we gave to it, the salmon colored border. Having set the padding left, the div now gave some kind of internal gap, thus pushing the project divs inside a little bit. Good. That effect is fine enough for us. In our mockup, there is also a gap, some padding effect on the right side of the screen here. Let's go and give that effect as well in our code. We've already done padding left. Let's do padding right. And for what it's worth right now, let's give it the same 82 pixels. Good. We now have a padding left and padding right of 82 pixels. Padding left 82 pixels, padding right 82 pixels. For the sake of equity and justice, let's leave it this way, having both the left and the right padding the same value. Our project boxes are still sitting one on top of the other, which is different entirely from what you have in our mockup, where they are sitting side by side of each other. We get to achieve that by setting the apparent element to display property of flex. Go over to our code editor. Let's go to, what's the parent element of the 3 project divs? Is the div with the class name of bottom. That is why we need to set its display property to flex. We go over to our web page. Here it is. The divs are no more sitting one on top of the other. They are now side by side, but they are collapsed, all squished together. All we can see is their border joined together. This is because if you go over to your code editor, there is nothing inside of the divs right now, no content inside of the divs. That's why they are all collapsed in this manner. We can just give it some shape and form by setting a width property for them. Let's give them a width of 30%. Having given them a width of 30%, this is what we have. We can better cite the divs now that we've given them a width of 30% each. Alright, that is 30% of the space they occupy. Have you noticed our project boxes, our project divs are touching each other, which is different from what we have in our mockup? There's some space between the project divs and our mockup. Let's go get that done for our web page. Over to the code editor now. We will use the justify content property to create some space. We would set the justify content property to space between, and here it is. There is now some gap between the project boxes. Notice also that there is no gap between the H2 and the project boxes, which is different from what we have in our mockup. There's some space between the H2 and the project boxes, as well as beneath the project boxes there's also some space. Let's get that effect done on our code editor using padding. Let's set padding for our parent element, the parent element of the project divs. Set the padding top 50 pixels. That's it. There is now some gap, but it's not good enough. Let's increase it from 50 pixels to 70 pixels and see how it goes. Alright, 70 pixels is better. Then for the padding bottom, which is way more, we're going to give the padding bottom 90 pixels. All right, why don't just make it 100 pixels? Good, that serves our purpose right now. So there is gap around the project boxes, just as we have on our mockup. Gap to the left, to the top, to the right, and to the bottom. Okay, we can now take out this parent div border, which is the div with the class name of bottom. Let's take out the border. We actually put it there initially to get some, to capture it, but we don't need it anymore. So we'll go over to our code editor and take it out. Good. Let's now get some content into our project divs, just as we have in our markup. You see, we can map out each project div to have two divs inside of it. The first and large div will be a div for the image, and then another div for the title of the project. Let's go over to our HTML to mark that up. Inside our project div, we'll have a div with a class name of image box, and then a div with a class name of title box. Good. Having done this markup of the image box and the title box divs inside of the project div, let's go to our browser to see how it pans out. Here we go. These are the two divs, but it's looking funny. Why is it so slim, and why is this one protruding outside of the project box? Let's go back to our CSS to point out the reason for these shapes. At our CSS, we already gave a declaration that any div inside of the div with a class name of bottom should have a height of 400 pixels and a width of 30%. Mind you, all the divs inside of this bottom div, whether it's a direct child or a grandchild or a great grandchild, as long as you are a div inside of this guy, you will inherit this declaration. You guys will now have the same surname, the same not just the same parent surname, the same grandparent surname or the same great grandparent surname. That's what this declaration means. Any div, whether a direct child div or a grandchild div or a great grandchild div inside of this div with a class name of bottom, they all will have this declaration. All right, that is why the width of 30% is what we're seeing here. So this grandchild div is now occupying 30% of the space, 30% of the width, and its height is 400 pixels. Naturally, the next div would also have 30% width and a height of 400 pixels. That is why it is like this. So you see, this declaration affects all divs that are nested inside of this div with a class name of bottom. No matter how many levels down the line, they get nested. But then, there is of course a specific means of ensuring that this declaration only affects the direct child of this div with a class name of bottom, such that it only affects this div, and this div, and not this grandchildren div. Okay, the symbol we use to indicate that is a greater than sign. So what this means is the direct child div, whatever div that is the direct child of this dot bottom div, it's only going to be affected by this declaration. So the grandchildren or the great grandchildren will not be affected. So this declaration now, having put this symbol, the greater than symbol, that means direct child, this declaration will no more affect the image box and the title box. In fact, they'll be non-existent. So let's go to our browser and see. Good, they're not there anymore. They are not there anymore because the declaration down here in our CSS does not apply to them anymore. This declaration means only the div that's the direct descendant of this div with a class name of bottom that will have a height of 100 pixels and a width of 30%. But as for our grandchildren divs, which is the image box div and the title box div, right now they don't have any height, they don't have any width. Their height and their width are zero, non-existent. That is why if you go over to your web page, you will not see any indication or sign to show that they are there. For us to get to make them visible, let's go and apply some styling to them. Let's style the image box, What this means is the image box inside of the div with a class name of bottom. Alright, any image box within this div with a class name of bottom. Let's give it a height of 90%, and then for us to clearly define it, let's give a border of 1 pixels solid dodger blue so that we can cite it. Good. This is our image box. You see the height is just 90 pixels. It ends here. That's why it does not go all the way down to 100%. We set the height to 90%, and this is where this is 90% of this containing element. And this is the border of 1 pixel solid dodger blue. Over now, let's go and style our title box, which selector would be .bottom .title box. Having given the image box a height of 90%, let's give the title box the remaining height of 10%, such that the two heights make up 100%. Instead of giving it a border of 1 pixel solid dodger blue, let us instead give it a background color of navy. We'll go over to our browser and see how that looks. Good, that's the background color of navy. This title box right here is supposed to display the title of the project boldly, just as we have something similar here. So we're going to go over to our markup, our HTML markup, and try to display the title of the project for this project one. Let's use H3 to do that, and let's just give it a dummy project name, Baram project. Baram is a location in Bayelsa State, an oil and gas location actually. So if you go over to your webpage, you'll see it's Baram project, but it's not contrasting quite well because the font color is black and the background is navy blue, which are both dark colors. So we need to style this H3 in such a way that it would display accordingly. So we're going to use the selector .bottom .title box H3. That's the H3 inside of this title box, that's inside of this div with a class name of bottom. Let's give it a color of white. Good, it's now very much visible. Let's send it to the center using test align property, test align center. Beautiful. Let's increase the font size of the H3. Font size, let's set it to 28 pixels and see, that's 28 pixels. I think this is a bit better. It seems bold. Let's reduce the font weight. Let's set the font weight to normal font weight. We don't want it to be looking bold. Good, Baram project. This serves our purpose for now. Let's go over and remove the border of, you see there's still a border of dodger blue for the image box. Let's remove it. We don't need it anymore. Good, that border is gone. We already know that this whole space will be occupied by the image because this is the image box. Image time. Let's put the image that's meant to be in this image box. Let's allocate it within. We'll go over to the div with the class name of image box. Let's open it up. And we'll just put the image element and locate the image we want to use. I already have images in the image folder, which is accessible to you via the cloud drive. P1 stands for image for project 1, P2 project 2, P3 project 3. So for now, click on P1 to, wow, that's the image for project 1. It is bigger than the image box. What do? Simple, just go to your CSS and style the image. Over now at our CSS, let's style the images, but instead of putting it down here, let's put the style just beneath this declaration of the image box. Go .bottom .image box image. What the selector means is the image inside of the image box that is also in the div with the class name of bottom. Let's set the width of the image to 100%. 100% means the image should just occupy 100% of the container it is in. Do not go beyond. Go over now. The image is now the width of 100%. It did not go beyond anymore. Before now, it exceeded the boundaries. But setting the image width to 100% means 100% of the image box. This is the image box, 100% width. All right. We also want to set the height of the image to 100% so that to fill up the remaining space here. Let's go over and set the height of the image to 100%. Good. The image now fills the image box, but it looks a bit elongated vertically. What do we do about this? There's a property called object fit. We use to fit the object properly. Set the object fit property to cover. Upon setting it to cover, the image now behaves itself. It now has the right proportion within the image box. Now, I want you to guess what we're going to do from this point. Your guess is right. We're just going to replicate this same sequence we performed with project div 1. We'll do the same thing for project div 2 and project div 3. It's that simple. Just repeat the same sequence. We'll go over to our HTML markup and put in the two divs. One div for image box and the next div for title box. Okay, and within our title box we'll have H3. Let's call this Southern Gas. All right, and in fact, let's go to our browser to see what's up. Good. We already have the Southern Gas project title with a background color of navy blue. So you see, there is no need to start styling the title box afresh, because our styling here already takes care of it. What this selector means that any title box within this div, and since this is also a title box, it assumes this declaration. That's why it's similar. Over now to impute our image element within the image box for project 2. Remember we said we'll be using P2. If you go over, that is P2. So no need to start styling the image afresh. Everything just fits in exactly because we already have the CSS taken care of. Next, we go to project 3 and image box first. Image box first. After that, we have our title box. Within the title box, we have H3. Let's give it IPP project. Then image elements with the source P3, set P3. Good. We now have 3 project divs, 3 project titles, and 3 project images. Simple. Easy peasy. With the output we have at this point, I dare say we've completed the project section, something similar to what we have in the mockup here, right? So let's draw the line for this episode here. It is one lengthy episode, but had to be this lengthy because everything had to be broken down into bits, sequence for sequence.